Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie McKee-Anderson, and I am Executive Artistic Director of Junebug Productions, and I serve as a proud member of the National Performance Board of Directors, and I am this year's Vice Chair. I go by the pronouns of she, her, and I am calling in right now from Picayune, Mississippi, the ancestral lands of the Choctaw. So every year, like many of you, I look forward to coming to NPN's annual meeting, both to be challenged and delighted, to see old friends and to meet new ones, to be inspired and to leave with big picture questions. This year's annual meeting did not disappoint in that I'm left asking questions, feeling curious, but also inspired. We are a group of fabulous folks, and I'm so honored to be in spaces where I can be inspired, and that I know that I'm not alone in asking and working on some of these big picture questions, because only together can we actually achieve a more just and a more equitable world. This year, and the space that I'm in right now, thinking about the next session that's going to happen, is reflecting on the current crisis that we're in and how we're all forced to imagine what it means to do this work now. So I'm looking forward to this next session, both for inspiration, to be challenged, and to ask more big picture questions. So without further ado, I bring in Space is the Place, BIPOC Ownership and an Uncompromising Future. Welcome.
Hello, and welcome to the closing keynote for the NPN Virtual Annual Conference of 2022. So excited to be here to have this beautiful conversation with some amazing people. The title of the talk is Space is the Place, BIPOC Ownership and an Uncompromised Future. I am Ann Ishii, Executive Director of Asian Arts Initiative. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently located in Philadelphia, otherwise the unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape people. We are in a state named after the people who swindled the land from our Indigenous elders. So I just want to name that. And we're talking about place and space in a virtual room. So I'd also want to name the precarity of the times. So the questions we're asking today have to do with what a just and liberated future look and feel like in this moment. Our speakers will share their visions for making and claiming space as essential for sovereignty, independence, liberation, and an uncompromised future for communities of color. The discussion will explore my own organization, Asian Arts Initiative, as we've been a hub for culture, creativity, and activism. Artist Zaire Love's work to create an oasis in the magical Black South. Pangea World Theater's collaboration to develop the Center for Peace and Social Justice in Minneapolis in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. And NDN Collective's work to build Indigenous power, which includes, in part, purchasing lands and buildings and working in solidarity with the LANDBACK movement. I know that's a lot, but I am going to ask that each of the speakers, give color to the stories of that I've just sort of alluded to. And so let me, without further ado, introduce the panelists. I'll start with Zaire Love. Zaire is an award-winning filmmaker, music maker, and a writer whose mission is to honor, amplify, and archive the stories and voices of the Black South, concentrating her work in Memphis, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Her artistry is an ode to being Black and Southern in America, because the Black South has always had meaningful cornbread to share, emphatic quotes. In her TEDx talk, Baby Hair and Hot Sauce Equals Embrace What They Ain't, she talks about the power that Black women Beyonce and Fannie Lou Hamer from the South possess, and how that power of embracing what others are not is the power that makes them legendary. Zaire's a graduate of Spelman College, Houston Baptist University, and the University of Mississippi. She's currently making and creating with her studio Creative Cornbread. She's also the Pihakis Foodways documentary filmmaker for the Southern Foodways Alliance at the University of Mississippi, and a 2020 awardee of NPN's Southern Artists for Social Change program. We also have with us Meena Natarajan, Artistic and Executive Director of Pangea World Theater. Meena is the playwright and director and executive and artistic director of Pangea World Theater, a progressive international ensemble space that creates at the intersection of art, equity, and social justice. She has led the theater's growth since its founding in 1995 and has co-curated and designed many of Pangea's professional and community-based programs. Meena has written at least 10 full-length works for Pangea, ranging from adaptations of poetry and mythology to original works dealing with war, spirituality, and personal collective memory, and has directed and dramaturged several original theater performance art pieces, including at Asian Arts. She is currently on the board of the Consortium of Asian American Theaters and Artists and is a National Theater Project Advisor at New England Foundation for the Arts. She previously served on the advisory committee of the Community Arts Network, on the founding board of the Network Ensemble Theaters, and as president of Women's Playwrights International from 2000 to 2003. Meena has been awarded grants from the Theater Communications Group, Playwrights Center, and the Minnesota State Arts Board, and was recently awarded the Visionary Award for Mid-Career Leaders from the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. And lastly, Gabby Strong, excuse me, from the NDN Foundation, their managing director of the NDN Collective. Gabby Strong is a citizen of the Sisseton Wahpeton Dakota Oyate. She currently leads the grant-making arm of NDN Collective, bringing over 35 years of experience in the tribal, nonprofit, and philanthropic sectors. Gabby has served as a program officer in Native Arts and Cultures with Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, as a technical assistant specialist with the Education Development Center, as tribal administrator for Lower Sioux Indian community, and as program officer with the Grotto Foundation, where she administered key initiatives, including the Native Language Revitalization Initiative and American Indian Family Empowerment Program, now known as the Tiwahe Foundation. Gabby was part of the founding effort of Ainda Young, Our Home Center, where she served as its executive director for many years. Her community and professional work has centered on Indian education, Indian child welfare, Native history, language and lifeways, leadership, and community development. She is committed to perpetuating and sharing Native cultural knowledge, particularly Native songs, dance, and horse traditions. That was a lot of information, and I apologize. I might have stumbled through some of the names. I'm deeply sorry about that. And I encourage everybody to please correct me. So a lot of the questions I had for this group, and we'd had a conversation earlier and just sort of imagining what it would look like to answer to the demands of the moment, kept coming back to how we are taking space, right? Or claiming space. And I know for our organization, we've had a very precarious story. It's a huge feather in our cap, and in the story of Asian Arts Initiative, that we were able to acquisition a large building in a major American city. That's always a big part of our storytelling. The question is, though, was it worth it? It's not easy. This isn't easy work. And it's part of a system of land development that, is very complicated, isn't it? So I think we all can empathize with that, those aspects of the difficulty of the work, but then also what is our responsibility once we're there, and how do we use that space and leverage it and protect our communities? So, I keep mentioning that we're in a time and in a moment, and there's a precarity to the situation that we're in today. But actually, all of us in this room have been doing this work for quite a while. As arts leaders, we've been talking about new initiatives and pivots, work we've done to address recent changes. But the fact is that movement building is generational, ongoing, dare I say, permanent, lasting. So what's considered news is usually only new to some people, right? To us, none of this is new. So I wanted to start by asking the group, and especially Gabby, with the work that you've been doing and the legacy that is implied and of course honored through this work for Indigenous folks. What would it look like for audiences to truly honor this work that you've been doing? What does that, lasting impression, that lasting change look like?
First, greetings to everyone. It's good to be here. Relatives zooming in here from Minnesota, Makoche, which is also known as the state of Minnesota, but is in Dakota, in the Dakota language, means where the water reflects the sky. And that is our traditional Dakota homelands, and part of the eastern region of what is known as the broader territory of the Oceti-Sakowin, or the Seven Council Fires of the Dakota, the Lakota, the Nakota, also known as the Great Sioux Nation. And that is how we are commonly known by most non-Native people, but we call ourselves the Dakota Lakota. And it is the Seven Council Fires of the Oceti-Sakowin that took a stand at Standing Rock about 5 years ago as part of that global movement that brought so many people together in a recognition of this pivotal moment that we're in, that we've been in when it comes to land, when it comes to our environment, when it comes to our collective presence and survival or ability to thrive on this planet, which means our connection and our relationship to land. Now, as Indigenous people and as a Dakota woman, we have always known and have understood that connection to land, that land does not belong to us, but that we belong to the land, that we don't own the land, but we steward the land. But in dealing with the forces of settler colonialism, the colonization, the annihilation, the Holocaust experience of our own people here on what we call Turtle Island, we have had to survive and defend and protect not only our very lives, but the lands that we cherish as well, the lands that we belong to. Now, as sovereign nations that have been here since time immemorial, in negotiating treaty with non-native foreign groups of government, including the US government, treaties were signed. Treaties were signed on a government-to-government basis. And those treaties had certain restrictions and agreements that become then the supreme law of the land, according to the US Constitution. But it is true that each and every one of those treaties have been broken and violated over time. And so most of our people live on fractions of land that once was theirs. And so that piece needs to be fully understood and acknowledged first and foremost, as we then begin to understand the disconnect then that we have all experienced, the disconnect that then brings us to this moment where we see the earth and its resource in this unlimited capacity, which is very much not the case, as we well know now. So the changes that we're seeing in our climate and environmental conditions, both in rural areas, in urban areas, this is a result of the disconnect. And so I think it's important to recognize that, you know, what we have always said is Indigenous artists have always been on the front lines of climate change. And they've been carrying this message for a really long time. And I think the global movement now to recognize that reconnection is necessary and that honoring is necessary. And not necessarily placemaking, because these places have been honored for a really long time. They may have been renamed by others, they may have been claimed by others, but when it comes to this area of Turtle Island, they have always had a name. They have always had a place of honor. And so that connection, learning how to belong to the land and steward the land instead of other concepts of conquest and dominion over those resources, is something that might help us in this movement to save this planet and have something for our children and our grandchildren to look forward to.
I love that so much. Learning how to belong to the land instead of contributing to this mentality of conquest over resources. And I wonder if any of you want to talk to us about what it looks like when that belonging, you know, I think it's hard for a lot of people to feel safe in their places right now, right? It's and how that takes us away from a connection to the land. Yeah, I don't know if people have thoughts on that.
I think definitely being safe in one's home, feeling safe as part of, being sovereign in one's nation, in one's community, in one's body. It is necessary for a people's prosperity. Our prosperity is directly tied to that.
Wow. Yeah. You know, as you use phrases like prosperity and stewardship, I think about our roles here also as leaders in arts communities, right? In these creative communities and creative cultures. So, you know, I'm wondering, as we talk about places we protect as stewards of the arts within Black, Indigenous communities, within communities of color, we did talk in a previous conversation that we might be due for a change in the way we talk about the spaces, that maybe the language we use, you know, you talked about places being renamed, but, you know, what are some of the traditions we need to uphold and sort of revisit? Are we changing the way we talk about place? Is that important? And, you know, I'm looking at Mina. I know you've been doing so much amazing work in also Minnesota. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and NPN for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. And though I am currently in India, speaking to you from at 6 o'clock in the morning, where I live is in Minnesota, McKee, in Dakota, in the homeland of the Dakota people. And just want to acknowledge that Pangea World Theater is so deeply privileged to live and work in the Dakota homeland, and also work with Dakota and Ojibwe people ever since our inception. We've been very closely tied to Indigenous communities. We have, and so really, and that is very important as a grounding place for where we come from. And also just even as a colonized people. I was listening to Gabby talk, and I'm sitting here with my grandfather's photograph behind me and my father's photo, with my ancestors behind me, and just really present to my ancestors in this place, and knowing that it is so important to just connect across, in that way to build solidarity with Indigenous and Black folks in the Twin Cities and also other immigrants, and understand what it means and learn deeply from Indigenous knowledge. So I really appreciate the things you've said, Gabby, because I feel like you just provided a grounding. We might as well close the computer now and say, we've just really, I feel like it was like a learning, like a masterclass in how we need to treat land and how we need to repair our relationship with land. Even as, I have to provide the context of Pangea. We are in Minneapolis. We work very close to where Mr. George Floyd was murdered, barely 2 miles away. And then we also live, I myself live on the street, on Lake Street, which is where much of our work is located. And also, so live on Lake Street, where 1 mile away from where the uprising took place. And so a lot of the businesses and people that we were connected to around the uprising, which happened around the 3rd police precinct in Minneapolis, burned down. And we were deeply connected with the businesses, with people, with work there, did a lot of our community-based, site-specific work there as well. And so when that burnt down, it really was devastating for us. And it also opened up an opportunity to actually build our own space with a restaurant in the area. And so really, so it's been a conversation of how we steward that building of that space. And knowing that in the Twin Cities, there are no spaces that have been founded and led by, I'm talking about theater spaces, right? So there are spaces that are owned by people of color. Like there are many amazing organizations in the Twin Cities, but there are no theater spaces that are led by people of color that have their own space. And for me, many of the models, as you say, Anne, were places like Asian Arts Initiative, were places like the Wing Luke Museum, where we visited to learn how space happened, and also in our own space from people like Sharon Day, who has built a space and built a theater. She's building a theater for youth currently. She has a theater called the Ikidoman Youth Ensemble, and she's building a theater space. And so it's like really those are our models for how we build space. So for me, I'm really passionate about how we look to each other to build those spaces. How can we build solidarity between Indigenous peoples and people of color, knowing that many of the immigrants who come to the United States have also been colonized, and have lost relationship with land in our own spaces. So it's become really important for us when we build space to figure out how we repair our relationship, how we decolonize, how we, in every step of the way, whether it's like, how do you choose building materials? How do you, what do we do? And we're really fortunate to be doing this with a restaurant that believes very deeply in food justice and has been serving community for ever since their inception about 10 years ago. And so really, how do we together steward this land? How do we figure out what that relationship with that land needs to be in a hyper-capitalistic society where, that equity is built by owning land. So, having those kinds of conversations and actually knowing your place. And I love this notion of belonging, because I feel like that's what we strive to create on our street. And one of the efforts that I have been very deeply involved in is called Longfellow Rising. So this area around the 3rd police precinct, where the restaurant is located, where other businesses are located, is called the Longfellow Downtown neighborhood. And so we created, as soon as the uprising happened and everything came down, we created a nonprofit, again, a structure that perhaps doesn't work for us, called Longfellow Rising, and to rebuild that neighborhood, but in a way that is deeply cognizant of who owns land, how is that land built? How can we steward the land? How can we bring artists in so that we can, how can we do it? How can we actually ground the space in arts and culture? And how can we look at that rebuilding through the lens of arts and culture as well? Whether it's visual arts, whether it's, whether it's performance, etc. So one of our first acts has been in a way of grounding that land before we even, own the land, or whatever that means, right? As Gabby was saying, it just ceases to have meaning. Is really, we commissioned a Dakota artist, Angela Two Stars, to build a giant sculpture in the space right opposite the police precinct as a way of healing that space, to build a piece called the transition stage that and so what she did was build a giant cocoon where the entire community came and wrote their hopes and wishes for that space. And that final sculpture is going to live in our space, which is going to be called the Center for Peace and Social Justice. And so I think I'm saying all this not only as a way of telling you our story, but also as a way of how, I guess I'm asking the question, how do we ground our practices? How do we figure out how can we actually have practices in place that repair our relationship to land, that really are deeply in a space of decolonization, recognizing that the entire world has been colonized in this way. And of course, I'm not going to equate our experience with those of either Indigenous people or African Americans, because those are particular experiences that have been deeply wounding. And so how do we repair even those relationships? And I think as immigrants, we actually need to recognize that and figure out how are we going to recognize, and for us, it's been a 25-year journey of how do we repair relationships? How do we build solidarities? How do we look to each other as models? Those are some questions that we've been asking and practicing ever since the inception of Pangea. So I'm going to stop there, and I want to listen to Zaire.
I'm hearing a few things I want to pull up. One is just how important it is to create a legacy or an archive or some information to share, because you're learning from others. You've learned from models, and we're now talking about translating a lot of this information to younger generations and then honoring our elders. Another thing I'm hearing is, not to sound grotesque, but that there's some opportunity in the shadows of change, right? So there was a huge moment, Lake Street sounds like it was going through a crucible of change because of various events that were happening over the last year. In particular, here's an opportunity to be part of the change, be a change agent that actually decolonizes the recovery, that decolonizes the rebuilding. And I'm just kind of looking at, Zaire's project, Remade Ruins, and just that phrasing. And I also love that you talk about the oasis of the Black South, but the idea of creating spaces as sanctuaries in the face of so much tragedy, and how much of this is a survivor-led initiative, precisely because we have to be the ones that are at the front and who are stewarding this change of how we identify place and how we belong to the land again. So I wonder, if Zaire, you have thoughts on what Mean is talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Zaire. I am in Memphis, Tennessee, also the Chickasaw Nation, Indigenous land. I actually am where I stay is right across the street from Bounds. We have two mounds that I frequently just gaze upon as I walk my dog. So yes. So I do. For me, places and spaces, and how I look at those, I do look at it as, well, while I agree with Gabby and Mina about about the decolonization of land in this capitalistic society, but I also really understand the need for Black folks, folks of color, Indigenous folks to own land in this capitalistic society. As we can just look, we can open up history books, we can read, we can watch documentaries and see how that power, that colonial power, that colonialism does not care about, does not have the same ethics, does not have the same, honor that we're trying to come from. And I know that they, you don't always fight with the same tools, but in this kind of season, if I will, I feel like in my case, I have to fight with those same weapons. So I do think it's very, very crucial that Black folks in particular, in what I do, own the land. Because even when we did own land, so much of it was stolen. There was a study that came out, or some information that came out, that like in 1910, African Americans like owned about 16 to 19 million acres, represented 14% of farmers. And in 2012, and even now, is less than 2%, and only owning about 3 to 6 million acres. What happened? You get what I'm saying? A lot of tactics of stealing the land going into some type of default, not able to get loans from banks and things of that sort. So many things that have really locked us out of ownership, or took our ownership away. Therefore, we don't have a whole lot of power in a lot of ways. And so when I think about that, I'm like, well, I think we need to get back to owning this stuff. You get what I'm saying? In that sense of like, we have to balance, if not balance, have some power to create the sanctuaries, to create the safe spaces that we can go to relax, we can go to grow food, we can go to learn and to grow and to commune. And so for me, ownership is really important. Also, coming from an ancestral history where my ancestors were enslaved, they didn't have the opportunity to own or be looked at as a person. Y'all know the 3/5 law. And we understand Reconstruction was just a blink in time. And then we have Jim Crow, and we have mass incarceration, and we have all of these systematic barriers that continue to, just pile up and pile up and pile up. And for me, I just think that one of the answers is to own some stuff, to have some stuff for ourselves, build it how we want to build it, to do how we want to do it. Whether it's the 16 to 19 million acres that we once had, or the 3 to 6 million that we now do. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, I feel that spaces and places need to be owned by us. And yeah, so that's really how I feel. Just piggybacking off of Mina's question. So I appreciate you allowing me to speak on me.
I love that. Yes, I think ownership is a really vital tool, and forgetting the sort of ideological origins of ownership, just it is such an important tool, powerful tool. And I just want to name that I think an experience that so many of us understand as people of color is our own forced migration. None of us really feels that they're in the place that they're supposed to be, and we learn to belong to the land again, don't we? And I know that change that's different when we're talking about displaced cultures in the indigenous stories, but it's still a forced migration, and it's this questioning of how we describe um you know who's supposed to be here, how do we account for land. And yeah, that's a really profound, you use this phrase, Zaire, that I love, proudly unreasonable, but we need to own all of that land, right? It's not just some of it.
I think, Anne, I just want to say something in response to
please.
Zaire, because it's so, I really respond to that passion. And also I feel like it is, as Pangea, we've been such an itinerant theater. We have, had our own space, but we've always been in somebody else's space when it comes to, when we've, so the final week of performance, we're in somebody else's space. And so one of the things that, and when you're in somebody else's space, you're not sovereign. You have to abide by their practices. And so even lighting a lamp becomes it becomes a political act. It becomes, which is a deeply spiritual practice in our theater, which is lighting a lamp, sitting in a circle, breathing together for 2 minutes. Those things become very, they are practices that actually bind us in that space for that time. And then you have some ED or somebody coming and saying, no, you can't light that lamp. No, you can't do that because it's somebody else's space. So you're constantly reminded that it's not your own space. Even in the minor practices, the major practices of systemic racism, we know, right? And in the way that land has been stolen and land has been kept, land has been given to other people. But even in the minor practices, it's at every step, it becomes evident how something is not your own, something you don't belong there. You're constantly reminded that you don't belong in spaces, even maybe by the way you look, and so I feel like grounding our, really be able to have your own spaces, grounding your own spiritual practices, those are so important, whatever that spiritual practice might be. And also owning your own aesthetic. I feel like then when you build a space or when you do something, one of the things that has been liberating for us at this time is taking our work outside. So that space has been very welcoming. We've been able to do many of our practices that we wouldn't do inside. And then at the same time, it's really, and then we've been able to control our own practice as well as our own aesthetic, because I want to also bring us back to this for theater. For us, aesthetic is so important. And how do we bring us back to our own aesthetic, our own practices, our own spirituality in the way that we create?
I'd like to maybe add a few things too as well, to just, what has been shared by both Mina and Zaire. So just, as a demonstration of solidarity with, for Black reparations, which is inextricably linked and connected to Indigenous LANDBACK movement efforts. I mean, they really go hand in hand. Our collective liberation is very much linked together. So I just want to recognize that, that is at the core of our movement. And so when it comes to, the many things that NDN Collective is involved in and part of in movement building, and the foundation arm is just one of many other things. But when it comes to LANDBACK, movement building, it very much is about returning Indigenous lands to Indigenous hands. And to us, we're defining that as all public lands. All public lands. Now, that doesn't mean we're coming for somebody's private property. Although some may, I don't know, but that in our position, it's public lands. But I just want to acknowledge those points, and that also part of land back movement building is that dismantling of white supremacy structures that have forcefully removed us from our lands and continue to keep people in oppression. And that includes the mechanisms and systems, Zaire, that you talked about, that continue to disconnect us from the stewardship of those lands. And whether it's the police, the military industrial complex, the prison system, criminal justice system, ICE, it's all of those things. And then finally, when it comes to Indigenous peoples and our government to government relationship with the federal government, it is free and prior informed consent when it's coming to decisions, especially policy decisions that impact Indigenous peoples and the stewardship of our lands. So I just want to, share that much, so there's an understanding of what, when we're talking about land back and we see land back movement building, what does that really mean? And when we talk about even decolonization efforts, one of the purest definition of that, I think, that I heard was that if every decision was based on our care for the land, the regeneration of land and stewardship and sustainability of land, that's decolonization. And we can all do that. We can all do that, no matter what space we occupy, wherever we are, we can all do that.
Wow. I want to ticker tape that across the screen. If every decision was based on care for the land. Yeah. That's beautiful. The sustainability of the land. Yeah. I think I want to talk about the relationship between the people and the land. And I know we each advocate for groups of people. And Zaire, your work, I've noticed, you talk so lovingly about a lot of the folks that you're connected with, and how many artists' work is vital to and vitalized by the place that they're in, right? The place that they live in. So what information about their and your relationship to land and place would peers benefit most to learn from, do you think? And then who would benefit the most from hearing this? It's one thing for us to have this conversation, but who really needs to hear this?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I want to also acknowledge Gabby's points, and I am in total solidarity. I love that definition as well. I feel like it's all like interconnected, and we're all like, we all have a common goal. And as you said, like, if the care for the land is our number one priority, then we're all good. You get what I'm saying? So I thank you for that. As far as myself and my peers and our relationship to the land and what that means for us in the arts, my whole mission, I tell everybody every time that I'm talking, is to honor, to amplify, and to archive the stories and the voices of the Black South. And so with my work and a lot of the artists that I work with are Black Southerners. And from this gaze, it is a reclaiming that is happening. For a long time, it's still happening now, but there is this idea, or there is this not even idea, there is this reality of wanting to separate, or Black folks wanting to separate ourselves from enslavement, from after the emancipation, moving north, moving west, from the Great Migration, from people trying to move from the South now, you get what I'm saying? There's this kind of distance, or like not wanting to do, not wanting to be close to the land, like being farmers, being, get all of these things that could link us back to these times, because it's so traumatic, it's so traumatic, a lot, so much so that our grandparents, our great grandparents never really talked about it. You kind of only learned about these things in school. And maybe, just maybe, if you were lucky like I am, when you bring up a point, your grandmother then begins to say what she used to do as a sharecropper, in small town Mississippi, Sledge, Mississippi, where they got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and they picked cotton from sun up to sundown. And sometimes they didn't feel like it, so they would rest on their cotton sacks. And when the white man came, they said, "Hey, the cloud coming." You get what I'm saying? So she would have never told me that if I didn't have a little, if I wasn't like inquisitive, like if I didn't want to, if I didn't ask questions, she would keep that buried down. And so me learning about sharecropping in school, I didn't know my granny was one too. Some like a living history book almost. But that history is so suppressed because we've been taught to be embarrassed, to want to disassociate ourselves. But in all honesty, we didn't put ourselves in this position. Why is the onus on us? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Why should we be like ashamed, and why should the burden be on us when it wasn't? And so I believe that my work and the artist work that I work with is trying to change the narrative in the sense that, hey, this wasn't our fault. This is not our fault. We're here because of some things that colonization did, capitalism did. You get what I'm saying? We are in these positions because of them, not us. So how do we begin to tell our stories in those? How do we begin to tell our stories in all of this mess? How do we reclaim where we're from? Because I can't say that I'm from the North. I can't say that I'm from the West. Y'all hear this accent? You know what I'm saying? Nobody would believe me. So how do I reclaim this space? How do I begin to tell the story? The story that was once, from the white gaze. How do I tell the other story? From our Black experience. How do we make ourselves main characters in the story and not merely background noise? And so I believe that like that's the work that we do here. And those stories are rich. Those stories are full of like innovation and creativity. And at one point I did a talk at the New Orleans Film Festival. I think it's the South Summit. And I said, what's in your hand? And a lot of things that we've done in the South, and I'm saying Black folks, have taken what we could get, what's in our hands, and made something out of nothing. Pig scraps, chitterlings, scraps from the table, soul food. You get what I'm saying? Things like that we've made. You know what I'm saying? And so like telling the story like that, not telling the story of soul food as it clogs your arteries, you're gonna die, it's nothing but diabetes. You get what I'm saying? Like, of course, enough, you can't have too much. You know what I'm saying? And yes, too much of anything is a bad thing. But if we tell the story from a story of creativity and innovation on how you was gonna eat and how you wanted to eat well, even in this position, well, now the story feels different. Now it is different. Now it's a greater insight as to how this came along. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's the stories that we tell. And who can benefit from that, from hearing that? Everyone, I believe. Black folks, folks of color, white folks, everybody can benefit from these stories, because it allows you to have some ownership of your own story, to go back and think about, well, what part of my story that I may have been ashamed of it, and I don't need to carry that shame. That's actually not my shame to carry. And what about the things that my family, my ancestors, or even me that I like, that I honor, that some people might not, but I want to tell the story in a way that brings more insight, more context into as to why I honor it. And so that's my spiel. That's how I feel. And I appreciate y'all I appreciate y'all listening to my low-key rant.
I don't think that
That's
was
just
ranty at all.
beautiful.
Beautiful.
Love
Yeah.
that.
I feel inspired. I mean, you've just described belonging to the land. It's being so creative. Like you said, it's changing the narrative, showing this from a place of abundance, and it's additive, and I love it. Yeah, the shame is not for ours, right? It's definitely not ours. I wonder, Mina or Gabby, if you want to talk a little bit too about this question of what are the stories that you think benefit who? Which of your stories, and who needs to hear it?
Well, I think what was coming to mind as I was listening to Zaire speak is, who benefits? We're fighting for a future for your children too, for everyone's children. It's not just my children, our children. We're fighting for a future for all of our children. So when we're through LANDBACK or environmental justice and, the voices of our artists and, the soundtrack to our movement, this is for everyone. This is for everyone. Everyone benefits from that.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I feel like, part of like what we are struggling with is also gentrification that's happening in our street, especially everybody's watching Minneapolis, as and that property is being bought at a tremendous rates. So you have to grapple with the reality of that. And then you have to grapple with the reality that, the racism, climate change are really that are also rampant everywhere, right? And also so you have separation from the land, the absence of guiding values and principles, and those are absolutely essential for racial equity and sustainable land use. So I feel like one of the things that that the current values in a colonial legacy have actually made us forget what it means to have reciprocal relationships. And so for me, it's really important, how do we build those reciprocal relationships with each other? How do we deeply listen to each other's stories? I mean, I love that, the idea of storytelling and belonging, not just to the land, but also coming into our own bodies. Those are all connected in order to resist what's happening. And so how do we build something that has a multi-ethnic, multi-voice, and how do we kind of break the silos between us as immigrants, African, Black people, Indigenous people? How do we break those silos and build something and look to each other as role models for building something together?
I want to share anecdotally just that I was recently on a panel of Asian American folks in response to these, I don't what's been in the media as the hashtag Stop Asian Hate, and I'll pause my thoughts on that in general, but a panelist said, why don't Asians have a flag? Like everybody has a flag. Why don't Asian Americans have a flag of unity? And he was like, I just really wish Asians could like take care of themselves, and that we could have, kind of advocating for a deeper silo, if anything, right? And he says, like the rainbow flag, the LGBT community has a rainbow flag. Why don't we have a rainbow flag? And I just kind of had to laugh and said, we do have a rainbow flag. It's called the rainbow flag. These flags include us, and Asian Americans are part of all of these movements as well, right? And so I love what Gabby said, like, this isn't just our children, this is everybody's children. I think to add to this, this observation you made, Gabby, of like, if every decision was based on the care of the land, well, by logic, that would then take care of everybody on the land, right? Like if by caring for the land, you care for everybody on it. And so maybe the flag is the land. Maybe this includes all of us. And I know that it's confusing because we're also talking about solidarity movements and individualized specific initiatives that address various issues and survivor traumas. But I love this idea of just more generosity between us, and just understanding that this isn't going to happen in silos, like you said, Mina. So I love that.
And
yeah.
Also, I think for me, how do you, it's not only, I think what Gabby said right in the beginning, it's also for future generations. It's not just for our generation. We're actually thinking about like, what does it mean to build, like, how can we transform and then transmit this knowledge to future generations? Yeah. So how can we also, and how can we build those structures? Because I feel like the current structures don't work for us. So how can we build the kinds of building blocks that we need to transmit, to learn together, Yeah. I know that I was reading something, I think, was it Leanne Simpson? I was reading something that was so beautiful. And she was talking about how in the Anishinaabe culture in Canada, that when the European settlers came, they found that even the children were listened to very deeply. That they would come in and they would actually, like, they would act, the fact that there was so much respect generationally between children, the parents and their children. And so how do we figure out how we could build those kinds of respectful relationships back with the next generation, and figure out a different education paradigm to share knowledge and to have intergenerational spaces. And that's something we're trying to figure out as well,
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to think of in the generational arcs, just the very young and the very old are so close to the land, right? They're the ones that are closest to the transitions in and out of it. So we have a lot to learn from, and to convey to them, I guess. I want to kind of open it up for if anybody had questions for each other or last thoughts. Any somebody mentioned, we're not usurping private lands, only public. We're just asking for reclamation of public lands, but I kind of want to sneak in a dirty question. And if you could kick anybody off of their private land, who would it be? But I won't put you on the spot like that unless you want to put yourself on the spot. But any last thoughts?
I guess I just want to thank the two of you, the three of you, actually, and Zaire and Gabby. I feel like I learned so much during this, and I would love, I would love to keep this connection alive so that we can learn across the country from each other, and also just learn from the practices. But I feel like how do we, I guess the question I'm asking is how do we build this in a way that benefits this knowledge in a way that benefits each other, so that as we build, we're not losing something. I think of the enormous sacrifices that so many people went through in the 70s. And sometimes I think the current generation forgets what we went through in order to come to this place that we are in right now. And so how can we actually remember and build in a way that builds on each other's knowledge, so that as we build our spaces, we're actually like, okay, oh, this is happening there. And that's a beautiful practice. And can we ask permission and create some, etc. So how can we be iterative and learn from each other? It's something that I'm really grappling with. And how do we also know what's happening across, apart from panels like this, of course, but how can we build on instead of keep starting again anew all the time, or feel like you're the only one doing something, and we're not, right? We're always building on not only ancestral practices, but also the practices of other people who've gone before us, who've done amazing things.
Quick shout out to the NPN cohorts, right? I think the annual conferences have done such an amazing job of convening you beautiful folks, and we get to have these conversations. I wouldn't have been able to put this together. This is so, shout out Caitlin. But yeah, I think annual conferences like this are a really big part of adding to that, brain trust, the database of information between our organizations.
I guess I would just close this time and space together by just thanking everyone and for your beautiful voice and all that you shared. And I think this is so important for shifting those narratives. No more absent narratives. We're part of it. No more erasure. We're now part of that. So the beautiful voices that you have and the stories that you share are all part of that. And as I think of our LANDBACK movement, and jokingly think, who could I kick off? But in all honesty, not wanting to treat people the way in which we were treated, right? So but wanting our treaties honored and wanting those lands that are ours by agreement and by treaty honored and returned, and all public lands reclaimed. And and there's something to be said too for even big green conservation efforts, because there's a lot of back padding that goes on there. And those can be admirable efforts, if not for the disenfranchisement of Indigenous people from some of those efforts as well. So in conserving lands, in protecting lands, in those big green conservation efforts, sometimes that means that Indigenous people and rights are then violated as well. And so that, we need to, address that, and then that's coming. So I think this is all part of the shift and this change, the transformation that we're in, that it's been underway for the last 18 months, last 2 years. We're in it. It's happening. And I just see the momentum and just the growth continuing. So, and I'm glad to be part of it with all of you. So thank you.
And I would like to say thank y'all for definitely allowing me to sit at y'all's feet with the years of experience and knowledge that you all bring to this panel. It is not lost upon me that I am sitting or virtually sitting in a room with legends, with folks that I can really begin to lean on with the things that I'm trying to build. in Mississippi with Remade Ruins. So I appreciate you all. Just from being in this conversation, I've learned some terms and some ways to explain myself in which, you know, I didn't necessarily have that type of or vocabulary like readily available in my bag, but now I do. And so I appreciate y'all for that. And for that dirty question,
Please.
I'm gonna answer it. I would kick off the places in Mississippi and in the South that continue to uphold the antebellum South, where it about the tourism of plantations and sharecropping homes where you are spending hundreds of dollars a night to experience this experience of the old antebellum South, where we are still being exploited and those practices are still being upheld as though they are moral and righteous and things of that sort. So I would kick them folks off and get the land back. But that's just me. But that's the answer to the dirty question. But I'm gonna come back to I'm just thankful to be on the panel with all of y'all.
I want to join you when you kick off the antebellum tourism industry. That's
Yeah, I might come down for that too.
yeah.
Yeah, me too. I'd like to join the party.
Okay, okay. I'll be sending you all a Google invite soon.
It's gonna be a really confused group of white Southerners. I love it. I think that's a really awesome place to end our keynote on. Space is the place, BIPOC ownership and uncompromised future. That was the name of this talk, and I really feel like we hit all the points. I'm buzzing with, like you, Zaire, just a lot of the language I've learned and heard, and there's just so much honor in the work that everybody's doing. I love it. Let's honor ourselves. There's nothing for us to be ashamed of. That's not ours, as Zaire said. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, NPN. I hope everybody had a really awesome conference, and hopefully this is in person next time. Can't wait to see everybody IRL.
Woo. Wow, that's a lot for us to think about. I just have to take a breath. I hope that you'll take a collective breath with me. So much that I'm sitting with. That last thing from Zaire, and thank you so much for just sharecropping. Oh, that just sat with me. I often times tend to think about the modern manifestation of some of these notions. So for me, the modern day manifestation of sharecropping is our student loans. You know, the idea that you work and you work and you work and you never get out of debt. That would be the modern manifestation of that to me. But thank you so much to the panelists for really helping us kind of sit and think about all the various spaces that we navigate every day, both in the world, this larger world that we're in, and sometimes within our own communities. These things are all connected. I'm left thinking, have we been thinking expansively enough? How do we continue to be in a dream space? A dream space that's filled, that comes from a place of abundance and not a place that's mired with what we don't have. A space that allows us to dismiss the notion that just because someone's never done it doesn't mean that it can't be done. I'm also thinking about what are the implications of how we make space for others. How do we make space for others in these other spaces? at places and tables where decisions are being made. How are we showing up to that? It's very easy to turn around and point to others, and also how are we showing up to these various spaces? Zaire, I am grateful for you mentioning what's in our hands, reminding us. It reminded me of that powerful sermon by Adam Clayton Powell of what's in your hands. That sermon helping us to remember that we have more power than we even think that we have. I'm reminded of these t-shirts. I love t-shirts. And I often find t-shirts that really speak to me. And I have this one t-shirt that has a saying on it. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And as my father and I sat this morning for our typical chat and coffee, he said to me, you know, we're finally beginning to see the manifestation of so many generations' work now reflected in this new generation, this youthful generation of individuals and organizers and artists. They have a sense of urgency, and we need that. There's a fire that's there, and we need that. We are fighting for generations who we will never see exist, but we know that they will exist. We will never see the impact of the work we do, but we can't stop. That can't stop us from doing that work, because several generations ahead of us are depending on us not giving up and continuing to lay a groundwork that gives them a fighting chance. As an example, I like to use New Orleans as a city that's a real close-knit network of artists and culture bearers and community organizations who care really deeply about our unique culture and the future of our hometown. But the care that we have actually extends past the city limits for those who have been displaced or forced out. And we have to also think about those who have been forced in to our various diasporas by various economic and ecological crises. For us at Junebug, we have been a body of Black people dreaming up new futures and gathering our stories to weave together this cultural sustenance. And in this era of crisis, this current era of crisis, we're once again faced with the question of how do we reimagine what it means to do this work now? As our collective communities and neighborhoods experience the impact of both climate destruction, predatory speculation, designed to profit from our art and our culture and our history, we believe that they're an essential part of our work is ensuring that locally rooted artists are engaged in speculating and creating our own inclusive, generative visions for what the future looks like within our broader communities. We believe that people who create, live, and work in our various cities understand most clearly what it means to create freedom in their communities, and that they're the ones in the best position to create and build a more equitable, economically and environmentally just future. But the missing link is how are we connecting the dots of our individual and creative experiences? How do we become a collective group of people gathering all of our stories and experiences, creating an even larger network and more expansive quilt? That's the question I'm leaving with. The line that keeps running through my head right now as we close out is one that is comes from a poem from the beautiful poet Sonny Patterson, from a piece that we worked on together called Gomila. And Gomila is a Bantu term, which means to return. And to return is also a way to remember. And one of the lines that she says that I want to leave us with is as from a poem she calls LANDBACK. And it says that we want to bring ancient thoughts to present thinkers so that future generations can be healed. What does it mean for us to remember where we come from, our collective experiences, as we weave together a larger collective of experiences where we have the ability to learn and grow from one another so that our future generations can be healed? I want to thank NPN, thank all the funders, and thank you, more importantly, to our last closing keynote for helping us to be in a dream space, a place that is generative as we step away from each other, knowing that we're still connected to each other at this time, and knowing that we have each other to collectively build on the notions. Thank you so, so much. I look forward to seeing you in some other rooms. Thank you.